right, amazing. Welcome, everyone, and thanks for attending MCE's Women's Powerhouse series. Today is the third and final session of this new three-part series. Thank you for anyone who's joined us for all three sessions. We hope you're really enjoying them. These sessions are designed to inspire female-identifying students on your entrepreneurial journey and to build your confidence so that you can build your business. My name is Rachel Poutler. I'll be your host today, coming to you live from Kitchener, Ontario. We have a bit of snow here, but probably not as much as you're getting out in Newfoundland right now. I am MC's newest startup coach, and I'm available to book for meetings with you to discuss your business ideas one-on-one. Before we jump in today, we would like to acknowledge that the lands on which Memorial University's campuses are situated are on the traditional territories of diverse Indigenous groups, and we acknowledge with respect the histories and cultures of the Beothuk, Mi'kmaq, Innu, and Inuit of this province. We encourage everyone to reflect on the lands where you are located and the Indigenous peoples for whom these lands are traditional territory. So with that, let's get started. So for today's sessions, we have an awesome fireside chat with Deanne McCarthy. She is the CEO of Swiftsure Innovations. I'm going to let her tell you more about that in a second, but she's also a Mind graduate, which is awesome. So before we get into the fireside chat, I do want to draw your attention to how to ask questions. I have a bunch of questions prepared, but I also want to make sure that we're getting your questions too. If you are on Hopin, definitely add your questions to the chat, which we'll find on the right. If there are questions in the live audience, I'm going to ask Amy to enter those into the chat as well, which you've been doing so far, so that should be awesome. And with that, I want to welcome Deanne to the stage. Welcome, Deanne. We're already both on the stage, so.
Hi, Rachel. Thanks so much for the intro and super great to be here. So my background is I am a MUN graduate. So I did my Bachelor of Business Administration and also my Bachelor of Nursing at MUN. So my background is I'm a critical care nurse, and I was just really dissatisfied with my ability to provide excellent oral care for patients on life support. And that's kind of the beginning origins of Swiftsure Innovations, really. It was just a problem that I saw firsthand at the bedside that I just kind of asked myself, why don't we rinse the mouth? It would be so much the cleaner and easier to do if we could just rinse the mouth. And so honestly, that concept really got me into searching intellectual property to see. Originally, I was like, oh, maybe it's already a thing. And then but after doing extensive IP searching on the eSpaceNet website, I was like, oh, it's not a thing. And anyway, so that's basically the origin of the company. So that was the fall of 2019. So we recently in September closed our oversubscribed pre-seed equity financing round for $1.05 million. And we've also received almost $400,000 in non-dilutive funding through NRC IRAP, ACOA, Center for Women in Business. And so it's just been an incredible learning journey. And we've been really fortunate to have so many intelligent, accomplished, connected people that really believe in the value of our medical device and have been really helpful in helping us get the traction that we've currently had and help us set our strategic goals for the future.
Amazing. Thank you for that intro. You answered a bunch of questions that I was going to ask you, but one of the big ones that I think the audience would probably love to hear more about is what exactly is the innovation? So you talked a little bit about rinsing the mouth, but what is it that your company actually provides?
So it's a medical device that goes into the oral cavity of mechanically ventilated patients. So it has to work around a lot of equipment. There's a lot of equipment basically in the facial and oral space for patients that are on life support. So it fits well within the oral cavity and basically simultaneously irrigates, so flushes fluid into the oral cavity and simultaneously suctions. So really what that's doing, so there's a few things. Because these patients are mechanically ventilated, their saliva production drastically drops off. So their oral cavities are usually very dry and their secretions become thick and adhere often to the back of the oral cavity and the endotracheal tube itself. So after we brush people's teeth, without the ability to rinse, there's no way to remove organic debris within the oral cavity. So this product is really meant to every 4 hours, rinse the oral cavity to effectively manage secretions, to thin them and remove them. And it's also meant to moisturize the mucous membranes, which are an extension of our integumentary system, so that they retain moisture and function properly.
Okay, awesome. So you mentioned a little bit about your current status of your company. So you mentioned that you had raised a pre-seed. So congratulations, that's awesome. I'd love to understand a little bit more about like where are you in the process of going to market? Obviously, with a medical product, it takes a little bit longer. There's more regulation. So talk us through where you are right now and what the next steps look like.
So our strategy is rapid path to market. So we approach product development with a turnkey style product development, and we've outsourced product development to a company in Ontario, Ironstone Product Development. So we're currently in design controls, and we've been able to, through user group testing, we've made many iterative improvements through 3D printed prototypes. So we're about to achieve design freeze, and we're sprinting towards our clinical testing in the first quarter of 2022.
Awesome. Yeah, that's coming up soon. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So when you're actually going to market with this product, or even right now when you're doing things like customer discovery or like user testing, who ultimately uses your product and who ultimately is paying for your product? Because sometimes those are different for businesses.
Yeah, so it's really interesting that you ask that. And one thing I have to say before beginning this journey was that as a nurse in the hospital, I would just use medical devices and little things all the time, and just really never had a solid appreciation for the amount of work that goes into, quality, clinical testing, regulation, and so all of those things. So the nurses will use this device, but the sales funnel for hospital organizations is quite complex, and it actually varies depending on like the geographic location. So the sales funnel for a Canadian hospital system will be completely different for a Canadian hospital system in the United States. So that's a really hard question to ask. It depends on what place basically you're talking about. But so for that reason, our go-to-market strategy has been, it's got to be really well thought out. And so our initial target market is the United States. It is a very large market, and it's generally not as fragmented as the Canadian market. So there, in terms of go to market, you have access kind of to a larger population when you have the United States as your initial target market.
Awesome. Yeah, it definitely makes sense. There's a lot more people there, and the healthcare system works completely differently than in Canada. So that makes a lot of sense. Awesome. So I want to take a step back. We've talked about where you are and really where you're going next a little bit, but I want to take a step back to when you first started the company. So you talked about having the problem yourself as a nurse, and you said, hey, why can't we just fix this? But what made you think that starting a company was a good idea? And maybe talk us through also, like, if there was any internal dialogue about, maybe I shouldn't do this. Like, how'd you get over that?
Well, it was definitely, I started researching it in the fall of 2019. So the whole patent searching aspect and learning about the medical device industry was like a 6-month journey of just really researching heavily, and once I found out that, it was patentable, there was nothing else like it in the space. I certainly still wasn't really fully convinced. So I had a couple of really smart, helpful physicians that I work with locally sign NDAs and say, I really think this is a great idea. What do you think? And they're like, no, it's definitely a good idea. So that's kind of what kind of gave me confidence to go ahead and spend the money on getting a really well drafted provisional patent application, because that cost a lot of money. So that was kind of the first leap, I think, is that I wanted to have a really good idea that I wasn't the only one that thought it was a really great idea before incurring that expense and kind of starting that process. So it definitely, I gathered a lot of information and, searched probably 150 empirical journal articles to, and even in the empirical evidence, it kind of the research calls for, new ways for us to do a better job at cleaning the oral cavity, because bacteria that colonize the oral cavity are the main causative agent of ventilator-acquired pneumonia. So I really had to convince myself of the value so much before I decided to take the leap. And so yeah, and so I think I was so convinced myself that it didn't seem like much of a leap at that point.
Yeah, that's fair. So one of the things you mentioned was like working with like physicians to better understand that this was something that they wanted too. Can you talk us through how you did that? Like getting in front of your potential customers, like what type of like pitch did you give them? Like did you show them anything? Did you just pitch the idea? Like how did you really get that validation in the early stages?
So it wasn't hard. There were my colleagues, so it wasn't really hard for me. It was just a conversation, you know? And so I guess I showed them a few images and, discussed kind of, yeah, I guess I pitched it to them. But it was just an easy conversation with someone that was already a colleague. So it wasn't like I had to have like an elevator pitch to someone that I didn't know. So it was, and I trusted their judgment. And I have to say too, like, the nurses that I work with, just super well educated and also, I have to say the nurses that we work with here at Western are just so well educated, excellent at multitasking. I think that the skills that a nurse has kind of are like good requisite skills for becoming an entrepreneur because, in a high fast-paced, kind of stressful clinical environment, nurses are able to, use good time management skills, great communication skills, are highly collaborative, compassionate professionals. So I've been really lucky. My local focus group here at Western has been instrumental in helping us make iterative improvements to the design with each focus group. So I've been really fortunate to just have access to my colleagues, honestly, that I worked with previously.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, that sounds good. Kind of starting with your own network and then expanding from there. Definitely a great way to get that early validation from the market that you're looking to target. So I want to talk a little bit more about like the skill sets that you mentioned. So, coming from that background of being able to multitask and like jump on a million different things at once and everything's always in chaos. I'm wondering if you can talk about any of the major skills that you had to learn when you switched to being a CEO.
I think again, I think I learned them working in critical care, and and I think, like I said, like I think that all of the awesome nurses that I had the privilege to work with, like they all possess those skills. So, like I said, it's like trusting your own assessment of situations and really being able to think critically and multitask and yeah, I think that has been a huge part. One thing that I really underestimated at the beginning of this journey that's been one of the most fun parts has been the networking aspect. Because forming relationships with people that are interested in what you're doing is so instrumental because they have knowledge that you don't have. They might know someone that's will have more information about a problem that you're trying to solve. So that I think is really why we've been able to move so quickly because there's so many kind people that care a lot about this problem that have just been willing to volunteer their time and open up their network. And so it's been every day is it seems like I'm gathering more information. And so anyway, that's been a really exciting part about it.
Yeah. So, okay, so this is probably random because I'm going back to when you started the company, but you started the company, you said 2 years ago. So this was pre-COVID, I assume.
Yep.
Okay, so this like technology sounds like it's definitely something that would be influenced by the fact that there's a lot of more people on ventilators. Have you seen a lot more interest and a lot more uptake given that there is this international pandemic happening?
You know what? It's interesting because, ventilator acquired pneumonia and the use of antibiotics in ICU and trying to reduce the length of time that someone's on mechanical ventilation has always been our workflow. Basically, it focuses around, it is basically centered around that in critical care. So anyone that works in critical care medicine has always known those things were a big deal, but definitely now that the pandemic is, all of those issues are kind of public information now, whereas before it was, we've always known it was a big deal in critical care, but now it's like everybody knows. So yeah, I think definitely it's certainly timely.
Okay, awesome. So part of the focus of this series of sessions, I guess, is really understanding some of the challenges that specifically like female identifying founders have been through. So I'm going to take you through a couple questions just to understand what your experience has been and any like things that you've done to overcome obstacles. And so I'll kind of start off with a fastball here, but technology industry, especially startup companies, is still very male dominated. Have you found that in building your business that it's been difficult to defy social expectations and be a woman CEO in this industry?
I want to say, not in my experience, it hasn't been. And I think that I've been lucky to work with my investors, particularly, all have made a commitment to diversity in their portfolios and in their corporate governance. And we have as well in our organization. And so I really think that I'm benefiting from the hard work of some really fierce women that have come before me. I don't know if that's really fair to say, but Sandpiper VC has invested in us, and Kathy Bennett and Rhiannon Davies, and like that group has been instrumental in really educating the population about the numbers and the percentage of women-led founders that get VC backing. So yeah, I would say that I don't feel that I have experienced that in my journey so far, but I think it's because of all of the legwork of all of these powerful women that have really kind of changed the landscape, I think maybe. But I have to say the men and women that I've worked with have been phenomenal.
Mm-hmm. So some of those like VCs that you mentioned or investors that you mentioned that are focused on diversity, was there anything you did specifically to find those? Like if someone's looking for investment for their company, as a woman or female identifying student, like what would you recommend in terms of finding investors who are focused on diversity?
Oh, listen, I won't say nothing bad happened. I think that one thing, so I've never went out to do any equity financing before, so it was a little bit of a social experiment in a way for me. But one thing that I really learned as a part of my professional development is that you're not the right fit for every investor, and every investor isn't the right fit for you. And it just is what it is. It's nothing personal. And sometimes you do talk to really rude people. Like one VC that I talked to really early on was like, you're not a real CEO, you're a nurse, people invest in a team, and and so like, great, like that person's not a great fit for the company, like next. So I think that you have to your investors have to vet you, but you also have to vet your investors, because at the end you're all a team together and you're trying to accomplish something really big. So I think that it's important to find the right fit for your company and for you.
Yeah, that's awesome. So switching more away from external perceptions and a little bit more into internal perceptions. So there's definitely a lot talked about with female founders about imposter syndrome and getting over that. So I'm wondering if you've ever dealt with imposter syndrome yourself, and what have you done to overcome it?
I would say definitely early on. Like I remember, so Kathy Bennett has been like really kind to me, and I kind of had this moment where I was like, I feel like any like exactly what they just, and she's like, you're experiencing imposter syndrome. I don't know what that is, but definitely I had those feelings before, especially when I was trying to before I had a lot of traction. I think I felt that way, and now I don't experience that so often, and now I have so many smart, intelligent people helping with me and working with me that I think I've overcome that now. But definitely in the beginning, when I was like, is this ever going to be a thing? Am I ever going to get investment? Like, it kind of, I definitely felt that way from time to time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair. Just for anyone on the call who doesn't know what imposter syndrome is, it's basically a feeling of like, you're not good enough to do what you're trying to do. So like you shouldn't be a founder because you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, is this a dumb idea? Am I the only person that thinks this is an awesome idea? Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So it's very common, and it's not just a woman thing. It is definitely, everyone experiences it. It's just a lot more talked about, I feel like, with female founders specifically. Awesome. So kind of switching from, not feeling good about yourself into feeling good about yourself, what are some of the biggest things you've accomplished with your business, and how do you personally recognize your own accomplishments?
I don't know how to answer that question. Well, I have a really great advisor who is so kind, Dick Foster. Anyway, I was like, I think this, this could happen or this could happen, but I'm not sure. And he said, listen, Deanne, if anyone's telling you they have it all figured out, they're lying. Everyone's just figuring out as they go, and you're doing a great job. So sometimes, and I just remind myself that, it's just that you gather information and you make decisions based on the information that you have, and you gather more information. So yeah, I just always kind of try to keep moving. And I don't know. I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know how to answer that question.
No, that's okay. I think that's definitely something that a lot of people are struggling with. It's just like, hey, like taking a second to step back and say, wait, I did this thing. It's pretty awesome. I'm okay to feel good about myself.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And there's like every so often something really amazing will happen. And like yesterday, we recruited a new member to our scientific advisory board who is like a subject matter expert in basically ventilator acquired pneumonia. And it was such an exciting moment for my business that I was literally like dancing around the living room and the kids were laughing at me. So I have there's more, I would say, good feelings than bad feelings overall. It's been super exciting. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Just want to take a second to remind the audience, if you do have questions, please add them to our chat. I will see them and I will be able to ask Deanne as we go. I'm going to keep moving along with my own questions, but I will answer your questions once you throw them in the chat. So please do so. Awesome. Okay, so one of the big things in being a successful entrepreneur is not just, being an amazing person yourself, but also having a group of amazing people around you to support you. So can you talk to us about your support network? Like what is its composition? Like, how did you build it? Like, how do you leverage your support network? What does that look like?
So I've been incredibly lucky to be part of a number of accelerators here. And that's kind of how I really built my kind of world-class advisory board that we have now. So I was involved in MUN Bounce Health Innovation. I was involved in the Dal Amira Idea Hub. Sorry, that's my executive assistant there. And also the Volta Elite program, the Volta cohort, and also the Creative Destruction Lab medical technology stream in Toronto as well. So through those, all of that programming teaches you so much about all of the aspects of your business. So with medical devices, like I said, there's intellectual property, there's regulatory, there's product development, there's like clinical testing. So there's so many different moving pieces. Really, my advisory board is a place that I can go and just be very forthcoming and honest about the challenges that I'm facing. And they help me unpack everything. And then they also help set the strategic direction for the company. But I've been working with them now for over 6 months. And so at this point, so they're a large part of where I go to kind of unload kind of the challenges that are happening. And also we've got like a really great team. So we've built a really great team. So I think overall, it would be my investors, my advisors, and my team members. And I've honestly tried to not talk about work too much at home. I have young kids, so when I really need to just relax and unwind, they're 10 and 11, so we do lots of fun things. And anyway, I try to kind of like shut it off at a certain point because and just kind of like leave it till tomorrow morning, I guess, if compartmentalize.
Yeah. How did you, I guess, teach yourself to compartmentalize? Because that's something like having a work-life balance as an entrepreneur is hard. So I'd love to, if you could talk to us through like how you did that.
Well, I think I'm from an older generation. Like I didn't have like a cell phone till I was like in my mid to late 20s. So like I really don't want to be one of those people that's like glued to my phone. Like I just like, anyway, I don't that's not the way that I want to be. So I found myself in the early stages when I was having like imposter syndrome that I was like constantly checking and rechecking and I just kind of like had a moment where I was like, oh, this is not good. And so I just realized that in order to be happy, and I just had to like, have a cutoff time and leave it till the morning. So anyway, it was just kind of at a trial and error, really.
Yeah, absolutely. We have had an audience question come in. So, do you think many nurses or others in the medical field realize that entrepreneurship is an option? I'm sure nurses in particular face obstacles and problems every day that they may have solutions for or want to find solutions for.
Absolutely. And I said, like, I can't say this enough. Like, I really think that nurses are so awesome, and they are so educated and quick thinking and competent and compassionate. I really think that they have all of the skill sets that you need to be an entrepreneur. But and I do think that nurses are at a very ideal vantage point to see problems. We're in hospital with patients 24/7, and we're the ones providing the bedside care and carrying out the interventions that doctors order. So I think that there are a ton of ideas that nurses have that can improve the way we deliver healthcare, save costs, and improve patient outcomes. Absolutely. I think you're right. Maybe they don't realize that entrepreneurship is a path, but in this space, there's a lot of nurse-led ventures that have been wildly successful. And nurses have actually invented a lot of really cool things. Like a nurse invented the crash cart. A nurse invented an incontinent pad. So they've already kind of have a history of being innovators. But yeah, I already within like my network of colleagues, like there's a few friends that have come together that are like, what about this? So there's a few things in the pipeline right now that have I think a lot of potential. So anyway, I would encourage any nurse that has a great idea to follow through, because I think again, we're at an awesome vantage point to see room for improvement.
So the next question actually ties really nicely into that. And it's, what do you wish you knew at the beginning of your journey that you know now? So especially coming from being a nurse into running a medical device company, what do you wish you had known at the beginning of your journey?
Whoa. Well, I will say I knew nothing at the beginning of my journey. But I don't know if I would change anything looking back, because how it's unfolded has been so enjoyable and exciting. And it's just been like an incredible learning experience that I don't think that knowing more at the beginning would have changed the outcome of where I am. It just, and maybe the fact that I didn't know anything made me more curious or more open to, and an interesting thing that I read, which was awesome, was that the only people that get more advice than startup founders are politicians. I really like that, because I often get so much different advice, and often none of it is the same. So I have to kind of evaluate the merits of all of the different advice that I'm getting and figure out what's best for the business. So that part's been really enjoyable, actually. So I don't know. I don't think I would change anything.
Okay, that is fair. Maybe it's just the being, humble and being willing to learn is something that maybe everyone could take away from this, is that there's a lot of things you're going to learn throughout your journey, but that's part of the journey, right? So
Fun. Yeah, totally.
awesome. Okay, so the next question is back to the questions around imposter syndrome. So you mentioned that you had imposter syndrome in the early stages before you started getting traction. So how did you deal with it in the early stages to really get to the point where you had that traction?
I think that I'm a huge fan of Sarah Blakely. So I think that I followed her advice. So it's like when your idea is in its infancy, you really have to protect it. So I really didn't share my idea with anyone else until I'd read 150 peer-reviewed journal articles, 100 different patents, and I'd fully convinced myself that this is something that we should be doing, and it was something that would be better for nurses, save hospitals money, and improve patient outcomes. Like, I really believe that so much, so that when everyone's not going to love your idea. Like, that's just not the way it's going to be. I'd say maybe half of the people that I chatted to really saw the value in what we were doing. But so I think that's really how I overcame it, is even when I met someone that was like, who cares about oral care, or whatever, that type of thing, then that I had enough information and believed in my idea enough and did enough groundwork to realize, like, okay, next, but it wasn't that simple. There were certainly some times that that definitely I've question myself, but I think that you have to do the groundwork so that you believe so much that, you, even if someone's cautioning your optimism, that you're not going to just kind of fall privy to that, I guess, and you really have enough belief to keep going in what you're doing.
Yeah. Would you say that's also a way to like get over a fear of failure? Because obviously a lot of startup companies don't make it. So how do you really like get yourself through the fact that like, hey, you know what, I might not make it with this company, but I'm gonna still try.
I think that I believed in it so much that I was okay with it failing if I tried, but I wasn't okay with not trying, if that makes any sense. Like I got to the point where I researched it enough that I was like, this has value. And the idea came from really from the patient's perspective. So it was like really, I remember there was a patient that I had that had a really soiled oral cavity, and I was just like awake at night thinking about it. How can I do a good job with the tools that I have at my disposal? And so anyway, I think that helped too, is that, I was doing it for patients, and that's kind of what I guess that was my conviction.
Yeah, that's fair. That's I think something that's talked about a lot is that, it's about what you're passionate about. Like you really need to be passionate about solving a problem in order to be successful as an entrepreneur. Do you find that that's the case? It sounds like you really just needed to solve this for patients.
I honestly never thought that I would be an entrepreneur, and I really never knew much about the space. But one of my favorite parts about this experience has been chatting to other entrepreneurs and their innovation and their journey. And I will say, I have chatted to some entrepreneurs who are on their, third or fourth venture, and they talk about the times that, their venture failed, they lost their shirt, but it kind of made me really realize that they're solving a problem, and solutions to problems improve the way we live. Like this is like kind of progress. And so anyway, it's really neat to see. I love even learning about what other entrepreneurs are doing and what they're passionate about. And anyway, it's been really awesome.
Yeah. Are there any things that you follow to really learn about what other entrepreneurs are doing, or anyone that you look up to as like a role model?
Oh, so many people. I wouldn't be able to list them all off. But I already said Sarah Blakely. She's really someone that I really love her story. And her story is kind of like anyone can do it. You have to kind of have that belief and go for it. So anyway, she's super inspiring for sure. And entrepreneurship doesn't have to look a certain way. Anyone can be an entrepreneur. Great ideas can come from anywhere. So, but in terms of like networking with other entrepreneurs, it's been mainly through all these great accelerator programs that I've been part of. And we're in this, we just completed the CTA Health Technology Accelerator in San Francisco. And you just get an opportunity to meet with other entrepreneurs. I've had the opportunity to meet with some other great entrepreneurs here in Newfoundland. And it's really great to learning about other people's businesses gives you insight to your own business. And so anyway, that's just been incredible. I have too many people that I look up to and consider like, to really list. There's so many.
Awesome. Okay, we have at least one to look at and see her story, and obviously everyone on the call can follow your story too. So that's great. Awesome. I think that is the audience questions for now. I'm going to hop back to a couple of mine. So you can speak to either your experience as a entrepreneur or as a critical care nurse, because I assume both you definitely experienced or got close to burnout. So I'm wondering if you can talk us through if you've ever gotten close or actually experienced burnout and what you do to both like get a handle on it before it happens, or like how do you unwind to get through really stressful periods?
I think that I would say definitely yes in both roles. Working 12-hour shifts and working mandatory overtime is not easy after 12 hours at 8 a.m. in the morning. Yeah, I think that for me, like I said, one big thing is like knowing like, okay, now it's family time. My phone's going off. We're going to do something fun together outside with the dog. And really, I think it's just that, like having like a good work-life balance and still we're lucky here on the West Coast that there's all kinds of awesome outdoor things to do. So, we mountain bike, we go to the Marble Mountain all the time. And we're really close to Gross Moor. And so for me, it's getting outside with my kids. I think that kind of like brings me back to feeling normal. And getting enough sleep has been an important thing too.
Awesome. I love getting enough sleep. I think there's, 5-10 years ago, there was really this culture in entrepreneurship that like, your startup is your life. You don't need to sleep. If you don't, you are a better entrepreneur if you don't sleep. Like,
yeah.
I don't know who came up with that, but
another thing that I've been really have to be protective over is my schedule too. So that got really crazy there for a while, and I was really overscheduled. And I came to the point where I was like, you know what? I need time to think too, because there's so many things to think about. So just taking the time to just give yourself enough time to think and contemplate all of the things that are happening is super important.
Do you have any tips or tricks for how you've managed your schedule? Like how you've whether communicated that or like used any tools to manage your schedule?
I use Outlook right now, but and my week fills up really quickly. Like my schedule next week is pretty much fully spoken for. Yeah, that's honestly a thing that I'm still figuring out. So I don't know if you should take advice from me.
Okay, at least have a calendar. I think that's a good first step.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So we talked a little bit about the like broader skills that you need that you kind of picked up from your earlier role in order to just, be good in a crisis and like, manage multiple things at once. But there are some more like, business specific things that you've had to, I'm sure, learn throughout your journey. Like maybe that's like doing your taxes or like stuff like that, right? That you wouldn't have done as a nurse. So are there any things like that you like? Are there any suggestions for where people could go or what they should do to learn those types of skills that are more like related to entrepreneurship specifically?
I would say that, a lot of the knowledge that I got out of my Bachelor of Business Admin from MUN, I think kind of transferred over to this role. And for the things that I really felt overwhelmed by, like, for example, forecasting and budgeting the project for the next year and trying to figure out if we were raising the correct amount of money. I was really lucky to find someone within my network that has been instrumental in all of those things. And we work together really well. So instead of me having to kind of learn all those skills from the bottom up, him and I can sit down and chat through all of the options, and he's able to do the whole budgeting and forecasting side of things and work in all of our cost recovery grants. And honestly, I would be fully overwhelmed to do that. And he's so proficient in that. And we work really well together. So I would say there's so much to know. So regulatory, IP, clinical trials, and all of those things that I think that sometimes instead of trying to learn the things that are like overwhelming or daunting, it's like you're best off to find someone like a consultant or someone in your network to become part of your team that's already an expert in that you work well with. That's the way we've kind of approached it.
Amazing. Yeah, I love that, finding people in your support network, or I mean, there's a lot of online resources these days too. So if you can learn something for free, it can be better than paying someone to do it. If you can find an advisor to tell you how to do it, that works too.
I will recommend, there's a few really good books that have been so helpful for me. Venture Deals is a book that I've read like 3 times now. And and I'll probably read it another couple of times. Founder's Dilemma. So there's a lot of really good books out there that kind of like touch on all of the things that you need to know to kind of make the best choices for your business. So anyway, there's a lot of stuff out there.
Awesome. Okay, we are coming close to the end of our time together. So I have a couple last questions to wrap it up, but if there are any other audience questions, I'm happy to ask those too. So the first, I guess, concluding question I have for you is, what is the biggest thing that you've learned about yourself throughout your entrepreneurship journey?
Well, the biggest thing that I've learned about myself, I don't know. I think that I do feel really proud of myself for, I think, knowing where the gaps in my skill set is and finding really good people to work with me. And I don't know, take this for what it's worth, but I operate a lot on like the vibe or the feeling. And I think that that's why I've been able to work with such an outstanding group of people. Anyway, I guess my ability to trust my own judgment, I think that would be the thing I'm most proud of.
Awesome. Okay, and the last question I have for you to kind of wrap up the session today is I'm hoping you can leave the audience with this is kind of similar to what you learned throughout your journey, but I'm hoping you can leave the audience, given that they're starting at the beginning of their journeys right now, what is one piece of advice that you would give them as they go out and start their entrepreneurship journeys?
I'm going to give the same advice that I took from Sarah Blakely. So it's like protect your idea in its infancy. Research it so much. Not everyone's going to love your idea. And even your family members who like don't consider entrepreneurship like a stable career path are going to caution your optimism or, so I would just say make sure you've done the research and you know everything about the market you're going into, everything about the space and intellectual property. Learn as much as you can and really convince yourself and give yourself the information backing to that it's a good idea. It's not just a feeling that you have. It's like you can back it up. And that would be my advice is protect your idea till you have so much momentum within yourself for that idea that, even when you meet a naysayer or someone that's not like in the army of the willing, then it doesn't matter. That won't give you imposter syndrome. You'll be able to just persevere and continue because not everyone's going to love your idea, and that's okay.
Awesome. I think that's a fantastic place to end things today. Not everyone's going to love your idea. That's okay because the people who do love your ideas are going to love it a lot, ideally. So thank you so much, Deanne, for joining us and sharing your knowledge with our future entrepreneurs. Thank you for the audience for sharing your questions, your thoughts, your concerns in the chat. That does conclude our Women's Powerhouse series for this semester, but do keep an eye on MC's event page for more amazing events next term. Also, don't forget that MC does a lot of other things for you too. If you're interested in booking a meeting with our coaches or attending other events next term, please check out our website. We'd love to help you find support and funding for your entrepreneurial journey. So with that, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today and thank you for adding your questions. Again, thanks to Deanne for joining us. I wish you all good luck on your exams and hope you all have some restful holidays.